is Taj of the Beat.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I'm joined by...
What up, family? It's Manuel Rustin, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher. This is my 17th year in the classroom. And this, of course, is All the Above, your home for news and analysis of all matters pertaining to our world of education. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this is the first episode you've ever listened to or watched, we hope you enjoy what you hear and that you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and follow button and all of that. But if you've been here before, man, we're just so appreciative of you supporting our show. Jeff, I feel like our viewers are like elite. Like the folks that listen to this show, just like we have a streak of only having dope guests on the show, I am very confident that all of our audience members are dope educators or dope people who care about education. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that, man. Well, I think the phrase you're looking for is cream of the crop.
Yes.
Creme de la creme,
yes,
as they say.
Nice.
It is, I mean, it's an incredible community of people, right? What can we say? And it's just so fun to interact with folks on Twitter, on Facebook, to read folks' comments, to read their reviews. It's just gratifying. So, yeah, man, we see you out there. We appreciate you, AOTA family.
Yes, for sure. We appreciate and love the AOTA family, and we hope you continue to enjoy these topics that we explore on the show related to the world of education. Myself speaking from the perspective of a classroom teacher mostly, and Jeff, of course, speaking from the perspective of Mr. Administrator, Mr. Principal Leader man, with those big fancy titles and all that. And
wow,
yeah.
Wow.
Hey, what could I say? What could I say? You know, the real teachers in the building, they know what's up. We know that we are the heart of our education system. So shout out to all you teachers who might be listening and all of that. So Jeff, all right, there's a lot going on. And our last few episodes, we explored a range of topics. I mean, we've talked about anti-racism through math classes. We've talked about English language arts and anti-racism and decentering whiteness. And we are soon going to explore the sciences and how science classes can sort of grapple with these issues of race and racism. But we thought we might take a little bit of a break for this episode because there's so many headlines in our world of education. Jeff, talk to us. What's on the agenda for today?
Well, Manuel, I think we got a good one for folks. And frankly, it's a little bit of a special episode because it's been a while, man, since the world was turned upside down, right? With the pandemic and
is that a Hamilton reference?
Of school. That
you haven't seen it enough times to know that it is a Hamilton reference.
Okay, fair enough.
It has become one. I've declared it.
I will trust you on that. I did watch I watched it on Netflix though, so I can at least say that.
But Disney Plus,
was
Jeff.
it on Disney
Get
Plus.
your streaming services
man.
right, man.
You know, it's all in the same little box by the TV. Man.
True.
It's just, it's just one corporation on the back end anyway. So, but all that said, yes, we have a special episode for folks today because since everything changed in our profession, we have had an incredible slate of guests come to join us. Today's episode is special because you're getting just an intimate time with your two favorite AOTA hosts, Dr. Manuel Rustin and Jeffrey Garrett. It's just the two of us today, exploring a few more headlines than we would normally explore in a typical episode, because there's just so much fascinating stuff happening, Manuel, that we need to dig into. So, buckle your seatbelts, thinking caps on, folks, and we're gonna get ready to explore some headlines with yours truly here, your favorite hosts of All the Above.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a headline related to the robot apocalypse and grading. So you definitely want to stay tuned.
Exactly.
A lot has gone on that I think a lot of educators, since we've been so busy preparing for this distance learning pandemic teaching thing, that I think there's a lot of stories that folks just were unaware of, and we have at least a few of those today that I didn't know about until, of course, prepping for the show. So you definitely want to stay tuned. All right. So up next is a special all the above do now segment where we will take a look at several headlines going on in our world of education. Stay tuned. What up, AOTA family? If you are listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, we would very much appreciate it if you scroll down to the bottom and leave us a 5-star rating. And when you have time, if you write us a little review, we would love that. In fact, if you write a review for us and screenshot it and send it to us, we will send you back an AOTAshow sticker for your laptop or your notebook or wherever you put your stickers, all right? So write us a quick review, screenshot it, send it to us over Twitter or Facebook or wherever, and we will send you back an AOTAshow sticker. We love y'all. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, now it's time for the Do Now, where we take a look at headlines in the world of education. And today we are going to look at a chunky amount of headlines because there's so much going on. So we're going to extend today's Do Now for sure. Hopefully that's all right with you, Jeff. Extended Do Now, how are we going to do it? What do you think?
Yeah, man, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I think we have so many fascinating things to talk about. This is like one of the craziest times in the history of our profession. So it's only right that we're spending some time with a few of these juicy headlines today. And to help us do that, we're going to break out our lexicon, and we'll talk about some key terms, bring some knowledge and vocabulary to the people.
Yeah, lexicon. Let's get this vocab straight. All right. Jeff, the first term for today is blah.
Blah. I mean, I appreciate the word blah. It's kind of like, it's like one of those sounds that's not really a word, but we use it like a word because it helps convey a meaning that you wish we had a word for. Like, you know, it's just blah. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you're right. And I've been using that word a lot lately. To describe my feelings for this online learning pandemic teaching school year. And that's perfect because Ed Week did a survey of teachers recently, and I found out that I'm not the only one that's feeling kind of blah about this school year. All right, so let's get into it. Holly Kurtz and the Ed Week Research Center presented results from this survey, this really fascinating survey that was given towards the end of August. All right, so this nationally representative online survey of 826 K-12 educators was given between August 26th and August 28th. So relatively recently, this is a time where many educators have already gone back to school at that point. And the survey included results from 415 teachers, 149 principals, and 262 district level administrators. And some of the findings that stood out from this survey related to teacher morale and teachers resigning. All right, so this survey found that 31% of teachers and district leaders say that teacher morale is quote unquote much lower than it was prior to the pandemic. 32% of teachers are reporting that they are likely to leave their jobs this year, even though they would have been unlikely to do so prior to the pandemic. And that's up from 26% who said so in July and only 12% who said so at the end of May. All right, so this is definitely trending in the wrong direction in terms of teachers feeling good about staying in the classroom. The survey also found that more than half of school and district leaders say that the pandemic has led to declines in enrollment in preschool, kindergarten, and grades 1 through 5. Close to half say the same for secondary grades. And those pods that were like the talk of the summer, those pods where parents were apparently conspiring to hire a teacher privately and have multiple students from different families together in this learning pod separate from the school system. The survey found that just 8% of teachers, principals, and district leaders said that they have actually personally interacted with at least one parent in their district who plans to make this approach. And only 5% said that they're at least somewhat concerned about losing enrollment to pods. So it looks like the pods discussion perhaps maybe was a little overblown or didn't quite come to fruition. And lastly, something that really jumped out at me, Jeff, is the question of what to do when a student does test positive, because of course many schools across the nation are open for in-person learning. And the survey found that 23% of district leaders and principals say that they won't tell parents about COVID-19 cases in their schools unless they believe a parent needs to know because their son or daughter was directly exposed. So Jeff, lots of data in this survey, lots to talk about. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, there's just so much in this piece from EdWeek. I'm really glad that they are gathering this kind of data. My only wish is that it was more broadly, publicly available. Not behind the paywall. Because there's just so much in there. So I guess my first reaction is around the kind of like lower teacher morale and the potential threat to the profession that we face because, the job is incredibly rigorous and complex and challenging as it was. Like pre-corona, I know there's the stereotype out there, like those who do, and those who can't teach. Which is like, cute in a movie or something like that. But anybody who's ever tried to be a teacher, has no sense of humor about that, right? And so
Right.
that was before the pandemic. Now it is just orders of magnitude more complex. And doing that work in a situation that is even more complex than it was before, right? And so, so my real worry, and I would love to see. I haven't seen real data crunched on this, on sort of a statewide level or larger scale. But I'm honestly worried about are we potentially, if this drags on, right, the failed response that we've had to the pandemic, the likelihood of schools that are currently doing distance learning having to continue distance learning for at least the first half of the year, likely in my mind for at least the entirety of this school year, potentially longer, right? Continuing this until we have a vaccine, right? And then even if you go back, most places around the country are doing some kind of hybrid model, right? And, the jury's out right now as to whether that hybrid model is sustainable for teachers, actually produces, the same type of benefits and feelings of professional satisfaction that folks get from regular school, right? Which is connection with the kids and seeing growth and, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really worried about if this continues and we have a profession that's got increasingly low morale, are folks going to simply leave? Are folks going to retire early? Are folks going to take other kinds of jobs? Are folks going to, who have the means, just simply stop teaching and, stay home and take care of their kids and the family will just adjust and, reduce to one income or something of that nature? So I think there's a very real question in there for us about what are we going to do to retain teachers in this environment? And I hope that our policymakers are starting to think about that because this is a time when we need teachers, right, even more than ever, and are potentially facing significant losses of folks, and maybe even significant losses throughout the course of the year, right? I know of a few cases where teachers who were pretty senior in their career and be look, man, this is hard, this is crazy, I'm not enjoying this, and they retired over the summer unexpectedly, right? And so, schools could be looking at mid-year vacancies that they have to fill, right? Which is not good for anyone, right? So that's where my mind goes immediately, is kind of I'm worried about kind of the integrity of the profession in that regard. And I'm hoping that we, from a policy perspective, can bring to bear some things that are also taking into account the fact that folks have really hard jobs right now and need support, need to be taken care of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All of that. And like I said a few episodes ago when Jose Vilson mentioned that he was going to enroll full-time in graduate school, and I said something about it. It always makes me a little bit sad when a quality teacher decides to leave the classroom, whether for good, great reasons or not. It always, part of me gets a little sad because I love the classroom and I love the idea of students having quality teachers in front of them. So when I hear that 32% of teachers are considering resignation or retirement who weren't considering that before, of course, not all of them are great teachers, but enough of them are to really, really, really make me sad about the situation. I would be lying if I said that distance learning has been going fantastic. it's been going better than I expected. But the reason why today's lexicon term for this story is blah is because that like best encapsulates how I feel about this whole situation, because students are logging in, yes, and students are definitely giving me life, being able to see them and interact with them for sure. I love that part of it, and our attendance has been great. Students have been with us, but it's just not the same. Like, it's just not the same. And to have these online interactions, it just doesn't come close to the feel of the classroom. It does not resemble at all what I love about teaching, and I would be lying to you. I mean, let me just be honest. I mean, we're AOTA family here. Everybody listening is part of the AOTA family, so I know you're not going to go out and tell anybody. But there was a moment a few weeks ago where I realized for the first time in my career that if somebody came calling with an offer that was away from the classroom, that like matched where I'm at right now in terms of salary and benefits and all that and security and all that, like I would take it, because this is something, this distance learning and pandemic teaching year is one that honestly, like, this is not what I got in the profession for. I for sure would consider going somewhere else if something else came along. Not now, because obviously, I'm a couple weeks into the school year. I'm not going to leave students high and dry for sure. But like, yeah, this is difficult. And, it's nobody's fault besides the fact that our nation had a terrible response to the pandemic. I wish we could be in a better place now. But just to be like perfectly honest, like my mother lives in Spain. I talked to her about schools out there. It really sounds like something similar is going on out there with regards to the fear over students getting back together in these buildings, and whether or not the schools are prepared and have adequate resources to ensure that everything's safe and sanitized and all that good stuff. And the numbers aren't trending in the right direction right now, at least as at the time of this recording, in a lot of those countries that were doing really well. So, I definitely, like everybody else, I definitely agree that our nation handled this terribly. But even if we did handle it really, really, really well, we'd still be in a mess. Like, this is still a very real virus that's out there. So this is tough, man. Yeah. This is tough. And these numbers, I guess, for me, give me some comfort in knowing that it's not just me. There's definitely parts of me that are like, man, I wonder if other teachers are struggling like I'm struggling, or feeling like I'm feeling, because like the class sessions will go fine, or it seems like students are enjoying it. But still, like at the end, I'm just like, man, was this even worth it? Like, is this like, am I doing right by the kids? And to see that a lot of teachers are feeling the same way gives me a little bit of comfort, because, obviously part of being a teacher is always second guessing yourself and thinking like, oh man, I'm terrible at this, but I'm just playing the part until someone discovers it. So there's some comfort in knowing that other teachers are also feeling kind of not great about this. But yeah, man, it's just blah. And I'm hoping that at some point we could get past this. But even that hybrid learning situation that you referenced, a lot of the teachers that I've been able to, see, share their experiences online are doing the hybrid teaching. And it sounds like it's equally, if not more, like stressful and chaotic and just disappointing as this full online teaching that we're doing in my district. So yeah, blah. All I can say is I hope we all hang in there, and I hope that this, that we get past this sooner rather than later before, to your point, before we lose waves of teachers and really have to deal with a serious shortage.
Yeah, I hear that, man, and I'm with you. I do. There is part of me that is like holding out some kind of hope, right? That like we're early in this. It's just a few weeks into the school year, out here in California. In other parts of the country, literally the school year just is starting this week, right? And in a few places in the country, the school year isn't even really yet starting this week. It doesn't really start until next week or later this month. So, right. So we're at the beginning of this kind of new normal, right? And we will learn, and we will grow, and we will get better. And I hope that, in part of that process, there can be some reclaiming of some of the joy and reclaiming of some of the stuff that makes school a great place to be for kids and adults alike, right? Which is the sense of community, the sense of, belonging, purpose, relationship, all of that. But there was one other aspect of this story, Manuel, I thought we should touch on before we move to our next story, which is
them hiding positive tests. I hope it's that, because I definitely have a reaction to the fact that they're not going to notify parents about positive tests in their schools.
Yeah, well, maybe there's two parts of this story. We should talk about that, because what really jumps out to me also is, I mean, that part is crazy too. But what I think it's worth naming right now is that across the country we're seeing significant declines in enrollment in public school at the early grade levels, right? Pre-K, kinder, the earliest grades. And I think that is, kind of the jury's out, right, as to what that really means at this point. Is this a situation where these are the youngest kids who, already have the most sort of like home care arrangements set up, and families are just like opting out of enrolling and going to enroll the kids next year, or in a way that some families make that decision for their child anyways, right, to hold their kid back a year or that sort of thing. And maybe it's not an indication of, say, like loss of faith in the institution of school or something of that nature, right? But if you project this ahead, right, if we're seeing like potentially double-digit declines in enrollment at the kindergarten level, if that actually continues in any type of way up through the grades, right? If that has any legs over time, then we could potentially start seeing like a really destabilizing impact, because as folks, I hope, know, as enrollment declines, so do school budgets, right? And as school budgets go down, programs get cut, staff, teachers, out of classroom staff positions get cut. And with those things, right, programs and people go the things that make school exciting, right? The things that make school a good place to be. That we'd be talking about laying off our youngest teachers, right? Cutting ourselves off at the knees in terms of our profession. So, it's too early for like a doom and gloom prognostication on that front, but it's certainly not too early to be saying like, what is happening here? And, what, if any, movement can we see on this front to engage or re-engage those families of our youngest students so that we don't see some negative consequences down the road?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, if I were a parent, I would be livid if the school that my kid goes to has positive cases and they didn't notify me because my kid happened not to be in that exact same classroom. Nah, I want to know. Don't hide any positives. So those 23% of administrators or district leaders that said they won't notify parents unless it's their kid was in direct proximity to that kid. I mean, I assume that their reasoning for that is so they don't want to cause a panic and have like half the school not show up the next day. That sounds familiar though. I seem to recall a world leader also downplaying something supposedly to not cause a panic, and we see what good that did. So no, if there are positive tests at your school, you need to notify everybody and let the parents decide if, well, it wasn't, my kid wasn't in that same part of campus, so, whatever, but don't hide it. And that makes me think of these college football programs that so far there's been a few coaches who've said that, they don't plan to make public any positive tests to the media or whatever. And it's like, I see what you're doing. You don't want folks to rightfully say, you got to shut this down. We need to not hide information at this time. I know that much. And of course, there's like medical privacy, all that stuff. But I doubt these principles are talking about keeping the identity of the students secure. I think it's more about like just not wanting people to know, because I don't want people on my back about we're not doing enough or we need to shut this joint down. So yeah, it's trash. That's trash. I don't know what your thoughts are as an administrator on that, but come on, man. Like, you can't just keep people in the dark. Not at this time.
Yeah,
especially this time.
I would be super surprised if that type of policy could withstand any type of legal challenge, frankly. Now, there are certainly privacy issues to be considered, right? Because sharing one student's medical records, which are private, to, ensure the protection of others does kind of put the rights of two different camps of people in conflict with one another, right? But there are all kinds of ways the school districts manage this across the country, where they share information about lice, or they share information about chickenpox or other kinds of things that protects privacy and also equips families with information they need. So I would be super surprised if at the first the first legal challenge to these type of policies fail. Also, I just want to be careful to point out that I can't imagine anywhere that it's actually a principal that's making this decision and not a district.
Oh, look at you trying to defend your.
Well, I gotta step up for the principals, man. Like, these are not principal decisions, man. Maybe in a district where there's just one school and like the principal is the superintendent, you could make that argument. But these are definitely like policies coming out of the district office that the lawyers and risk management folks have looked at. You know what I mean? And principals may, if they have to do that, if they have to abide by that type of policy, their hands may be tied. But I also would have a hard time thinking that any principal would ethically and responsibly look at the situation and be like, yeah, we need to brush that under the rug and not tell anyone, right? That's yeah.
Stand up for your peoples, man. Stand up for your peoples.
I see you out there, hardworking principals.
Man, they ain't listening. Any hardworking principal that's listening to this, they're probably hearing this like 3-4 months from now, because as busy as they are at this time of year with all that's going on, obviously, if you are taking the time out to listen to this podcast and you are a school principal and you're hearing it within the first week of it coming out, shout out to you for making space for all of the above.
Indeed.
And we definitely see you. We know these are crazy, crazy times to be a principal, for sure. All right, Jeff. I think we have some other stories to talk about. I think we have some other terms for our lexicon today. So what's next?
All right, Manuel. Next up in our lexicon is the term tilting.
That's fancy. So the last story, I went with blah because, blah. But now you're over here bringing some actual terminology here, Jeff. I need you to break that down.
Yes, tilting, Manuel, as in what the thousands of students across California and other parts of the country who are continuing to take the SAT and the ACT in an effort to tilt the odds of college admission in their favor. It is what they are doing by continuing to seek out these exams, even though most schools across the country have said we no longer require them, or in some cases, like here in California, they won't even look at them at all. So, tilting. And here we go, man. Well, this story is fascinating. Comes to us from Larry Gordon in EdSource, who did some good reporting here. And he is letting us know that there are many high school seniors scrambling to schedule SAT and ACT tests this fall, even though, as I said, most private and public colleges, including both of California's massive state university systems, the University of California and the Cal State system, have said they are not required during the pandemic. Now, although some of the UCs had previously already made the decision that they would not consider test scores, or that those scores would be optional, earlier this month, a Superior Court judge in Alameda County, which is up in the Bay Area, ruled in response to a federal lawsuit filed on behalf of students with disabilities that the UC campuses were prevented from considering SAT and ACT results at all, right? So even in this landscape, we are seeing students continue to pursue opportunities to take the tests. Now, these tests are especially needed by students who are planning to apply to the minority of schools across the country who still do require scores. Those, in many cases, being some of the more selective private colleges or state systems in some states where they have not opted out of them. And those students are awaiting testing agencies' decisions on when and where to hold exams, or on their local authorities ruling on whether to allow the exams to be held. Of course, typically these exams are taken at, in a big auditorium at a school, or in a testing center, which is a large group gathering in a confined indoor space, right? Which obviously has big public health implications right now. Now, so far in August and September, many testing sites have remained closed throughout the state of California and elsewhere, although some limited testing continues around the country. About half of the test centers nationally that were originally expected to host SAT testing on August 29th did not open, according to the College Board. So we are seeing, Manuel, a real shifting landscape here around standardized testing, but then perhaps also a subset of students aggressively still pursuing, the quote unquote opportunity to take these tests to kind of stack the deck in their favor for fancy schools, private schools and competitive colleges across the country. So, Manuel, I'm very curious. What say you about the tilting of the odds that is happening here in our beloved state of California?
Yeah, well, I think, used the phrase shifting landscape, and I am rooting for a full-on mudslide to sweep these tests out of our sphere of education, because you know how I feel about these tests during normal times, which are long gone, and who knows if we'll ever be in a spot again where we can say, hey, these are normal times. But during normal times, pre-COVID times, we already know that these tests were more accurate predictors of students' income and parents' education level than they were student actual success. And of course, we've debated that before, and there's different ways you could look at it, but by and large, these tests tend to correlate for sure with income and parents' education level. Now, when you add the pandemic to it, and you add the fact that not every student is living in a place, in a community that can safely offer in-person tests, now you're just adding to the inequity for sure. Because if half of the test centers didn't end up opening, we could go ahead and assume the half that didn't open are the half that are in counties that wouldn't allow them to open. And we already know that COVID and COVID cases are definitely impacting Black and brown communities more than others. So the ones that did open, I assume, are in areas with lower case rates or in areas that haven't shuttered as much as the rest of the city or the rest of the state or whatever. And those students are able to go and test, and those students might not be feeling the effects of this pandemic to the same level as students that might be in a urban area that's been heavily impacted by COVID. So you are taking something that already is inequitable and adding layers to it to make it even worse. And for all the schools saying like, oh, well, test optional, you don't need it. Yeah, that's great. But we know what students are going to be the ones self-reporting their scores. So if I'm a student and I have the option of self-reporting my score, and in my particular county, COVID hasn't hit nearly as hard, and I'm sitting here chilling, and I get to go in and take this test with a clear mind and score well, boom, I just elevated my application over somebody else, despite whatever these colleges might be saying. So that's just grossly unfair. Obviously, I teach in a community that's part of LA County, and LA County has shut down very heavily as compared to like Orange County, let's say, and my students are primarily Black and brown, marginalized community, and for sure my students are not going to be able to just go into a testing center and take these tests. So if my students don't have the option of reporting their scores, it just hurts me to know as a classroom teacher that they're going to be up against students from communities where they were able to take the test and they were able to go in there and not worry so much about the fact that their families might be essential workers and all this. And it's just trash. Like, it's just complete trash. And shout out to Jen the Tutor on Twitter, who definitely has been advocating very heavily against this idea of test optional. Like, if I don't want the test around, period. Obviously, I've said that plenty of times. But also, if
tell them why you mad, man. Well, tell them why you mad,
man. So if you're gonna allow some students to take it and some not, that's just even worse. Like, either everybody gets to take it or nobody gets to take it. Like, just let's not even play around with this idea of like, oh, we'll let them self-report, but it's not gonna unfairly give them an advantage or boost. Like, get out of here with all that. I'm ready to see these tests just be gone. And those online versions that they were talking about, like, I don't know if you remember, Jeff, they were talking about doing online versions of the SAT. Yeah. We already know that's going to be like just a disaster based on the AP testing fiasco of the spring. And we also already know that online access, internet access, which should be a human right in 2020, given the necessity of the internet, we already know there's still families out there using slow hotspots when they can find them, or doing their work in the parking lot of some fast food restaurant or something that might have free Wi-Fi. Yeah, this is whack. Yeah. Whack, Jeff.
Yeah, it's riddled with problems, Manuel. And I will say, as a former government teacher, and you as a social science teacher yourself, I wonder if you've been thinking about this, but I will tell you, never before in my life have I more frequently thought of the fact that we have typically taught about federalism in our social studies curriculum as like this kind of cool, interesting aspect of American society. And I think we are living through a just sort of very concretely plain and obvious historical moment when our federal system is actually a stupid way of doing things, right? Like it is a stupid way of organizing a college and, an educational system, let's say, to have 50 different, and that's just the states, right? That's not even DC and the territories, right? But 50 several odd systems of doing school across the country, right? That then have to intersect with entities like the College Board and entities like the NCAA, and then all of the various state university systems across the country, right? And you wind up with this patchwork set of policies that on a certain level justifies like, well, if some state systems or some universities are going to require the test, then we can't not offer the tests, right? But then at the same time, other states are being forced from court injunctions, to not consider the test, right? We just have this horribly unleveled playing field. And I'm with you. Like it should be an all or nothing proposition. They are at this point still working on developing online versions of SAT and ACT, but those will not be ready in time for for this year's high school seniors to take and have completed in time for consideration in their applications this fall. So, maybe a year from now, we're, depending on where we are with the pandemic and school, we'll be in a different situation. But the reality is like, this is a stupid freaking mess that we don't need to be in right now. And I think, it sounds nice that these tests you could take and it will just help you. But I think the real like proof is going to be in the pudding on that one, right? The onus is going to be on universities to live up to that commitment and to make sure that their policy is not putting undue equity barriers in the way of low-income students, rural students, students of color, right? Students who don't have alumni as parents and that sort of thing to be competitive applicants in a highly, highly competitive college application process across this country, right? And so I'm going to read Stanford University, right? One of the premier institutions in the country said...
Ooh, Stanford. Nobody likes Stanford, Jeff, but go ahead.
That other school across the bay. So Stanford said the decision about whether to submit scores is, quote, in the hands of the applicant. If you have already taken the ACT or SAT and you feel that your scores are a positive reflection of your academic preparedness, then you are welcome to self-report them. Your application will not be at a disadvantage if you choose not to report your scores, right? End quote. So, they have some real work to do to live up to that. And so does every college and university across the country who's making a similar commitment, because I can just see like subtle ways in which, what's going to happen is this is going to privilege the most privileged, right? When there's a tiebreaker, your privilege is going to be able to express itself because, as one student who is named in this article, could drive to Vegas with their family and take the test in another state where they're offering the test, right? But if you're just like a kid and your family has no car, you live in the hood in LA, like what are you going to do, right? So this is a mess. It doesn't need to be a mess. We can do this better. And I hope that universities are really the keepers of the flame on fairness and equity when it comes to considering these scores or not considering these scores.
Amen, for sure. All right, Jeff, our next lexicon term for today. I'm curious if you've heard this term before or if you're familiar with this term. I would venture to guess that you are, because you are probably one of the most intelligent, articulate people that I know, and your vocab is super strong, and I try to keep up. I try my best. I hope our AOTA family appreciates me trying to keep up, but we'll see. The term here is techno-chauvinism.
Well, Dr. Manuel Rustin, I have to say that was a new term for me before I encountered this article. I mean, I think I could piece together what it means, but I hadn't heard that one before. It's a good one, though. It's a little, little tongue twister, so to speak, but techno-chauvinism. I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. techno-chauvinism means, or it's the idea that technological solutions are superior. I would say probably a synonym for that would be something along the lines of like a robot apocalypse, because that's what always happens when we trust in technology to be the superior pathway for us. At least that's what happens in film and stories. And it's just only a matter of time until these robots take over, especially when you consider what folks try to do with technology in this story as it relates to grades, another favorite topic of ours for sure. So let's get into it. This story comes from the New York Times. It's actually an opinion piece that appeared in the New York Times by Meredith Brousseau, who's an artificial intelligence researcher at NYU. And in her piece, she wrote about how the IB exams, the International Baccalaureate, which is, of course, a global program that awards a prestigious diploma to students in addition to the one they receive from their high schools, it canceled its usual in-person exams, of course, because of the pandemic last spring, and instead, it used an algorithm to quote-unquote predict students' grades based on an array of student information, including teacher estimated grades and past performance by students in each school. So yes, Jeff, they in lieu of the actual exams, which they couldn't give because the pandemic, the IB program reached for these algorithms to predict what students would have gotten. And in this opinion piece, Brousseau shares the story of Isabel Castañeda, who is a native Spanish speaker who spends her summers in Mexico, and she scored a 5 on her AP Spanish exam, as well as consistent A pluses in her Spanish classes. But the IB algorithm gave her a failing score for her IB Spanish exam. And Castañeda was not alone in receiving these surprising failing grades. Tens of thousands of IB students protested their computer-assigned grades online and in person. And of course, grades could have been assigned based on sample materials that students had already submitted by the time school shut down. But instead, the organization decided to use an algorithm, which probably seemed like it would be the cheaper and easier solution, according to Brousseau. And high-achieving, low-income students were, spoiler alert, the ones who were hit the hardest by these algorithm grades. Now, the algorithm itself works similar to how Netflix and Amazon figures out what you want to watch next or purchase next. Essentially, these data scientists took student information and fed it into a computer, and the computer then constructed a model that outputted individual student grades, which International Baccalaureate claimed the students would have gotten if they had taken the standardized tests that didn't happen. So, Jeff, how are you feeling about the Netflixification of grades and grading? This is a wild story, man. What are your thoughts?
No, it's completely a wild story. And I feel like as cool a word as techno-chauvinism is, and I'm down with that, our actual lexicon term for this story should have been trash or hot trash, because what this story is some hot trash, man. Like, honestly, when we were talking about this before the show, both of us were like, I can't believe I didn't hear about this story. Like, because this was clearly going on, last spring, right? And into the summer. Right. And I know neither of us are really in our immediate job context, like very deeply engaged in International Baccalaureate, right? But I went to a high school that had an IB program. I've worked with some schools over the years that have an IB program, and there's tens of thousands of seniors across the country who are working towards their IB diploma last spring, and it's astounding to me that the actual solution they came to was to not have the kids actually take the exam, right? Like, as bad as things went with AP exams last spring, at least the kids got to take the test, and there was some evidence of student effort and some student work product to assess, right? Now, I'm not saying that was the best thing in the world, but it's certainly better than saying, instead of you taking the test, we're just going to tell you how we think you were going to do based on...
Like, what's the point of taking the test then if you already had this idea?
Yeah, it's so like big brothery, creepy kind of thing, right? It just flies in the face of the sort of basic sense of fairness and equal opportunity that is supposed to undergird any, just system of public education. population, right? Now, obviously, first of all, IB exams are super elite, the same way that AP exams are, right? So we're, this is already a slice of the educational world that is, that is kind of like in a different conversation in some ways than, than the rest of the general student population. But that said, it just strikes me as so horribly unfair to the students, right? It strikes me as like, so what does this really mean? Like, I'm assuming their motivation was, we still want to offer the IB diploma, which of course requires students completing a certain set of IB courses and earning certain grades, but also earning a certain set of passing scores on IB exams in order to earn. And so they're like, well, we don't want to rob students of the diploma. So what we're going to do is have the computer tell us how the kid would have done. Like, it's just, imagine the NBA is playing the playoffs right now. Imagine if what we said was, let's just have an algorithm tell us, based on points per game and minutes played and this and that, who was going to win. And we'll just tell you at the end who won the championship, Apply this to any other context in life, Manuel, and people would look at it like it's utterly insane. And that's what this is, dude. Like, it's just such a crazy story to me, man. Like, I honestly can't believe they did it. And this is an international program, right? With hundreds of thousands of kids across the globe participating. So this is wild, man. I was completely shocked by this story.
Yeah, absolutely. As many technology-related discussions as we've had this year, this is one that, like, it passed me up. I didn't realize this happened either, and this is just bonkers. And I just in my head, I just picture some tech person who thinks they're just so smart, and they're in this meeting, this Zoom meeting, probably because it was a pandemic, and had this bright idea of trying to work with the IB to predict what students would have gotten. And I know somebody went to sleep that night thinking like they solved it. Like, this is going to be the next big thing. We don't have to do the pen and paper tests anymore. We don't have to, like, we could, sell this to so many universities, so many places. I just know behind every bad tech story is somebody who thought this was going to be a great idea and was patting themselves on the back and bragging about it probably. And this is just terrible. Now, the student that was profiled in this story, it seems that the reason why she got a failing grade for Spanish, despite A pluses in her Spanish class, despite her being a native Spanish speaker, despite her spending her summers in Mexico with family, was the fact that one of the factors that the algorithm would consider is the school and students' past performance at that school. Not the student in question, but students generally from that school over time. And her being at a school that is a marginalized, under-resourced school, she describes in the story saying that several of her peers also got marked down severely in ways that they shouldn't have. And it just seems that just being at that school automatically meant the algorithm is going ahead and just assuming, like all these other black and brown kids previous to you, you're probably not so hot at tests, and we're going to go ahead and just assume that your score is going to come out low, which is complete trash. It definitely begs the question why, if that's the mindset, then why even bother like having any assessments at all if you're just going to go ahead and just assume what a student's going to get? It's like the worst element of teaching. This just assumption that your kids are automatically going to fail. Just the worst. Yeah. And the writer of this piece, Professor Brousseau, she mentions in the article, she says, quote, "The pandemic makes it tempting to imagine that social institutions like school can be replaced by technological solutions. They can't." And I think that's just the perfect encapsulation of the discussions we've been having this year. Technology will not save us. No matter how cool your tech is, no matter what apps your school has purchased, no matter any of that, you simply cannot replace the social interactions of a school and that communal feeling of teaching and learning. You just cannot replace it with technology. And this is probably the first of many, well, it's not even the first, but of this kind, probably first of many stories of someone reaching for technology to try to solve a problem during the pandemic, and that technology failing miserably, and failing students in this case. This is not a Netflix recommendation that's low stakes, that it's like, okay, if I don't end up liking that show, I don't end up liking the show. this is like people's future that we're playing with here, and not we, the IB. I definitely take no ownership over this craziness.
Yeah.
Just
none
wild.
at all. This is super racist, man. It's like taking racism and putting it into, and classism, and putting it into an algorithm, and then having it produce racist and classist outcomes, man. I mean, it's like next level messed up. And I'm so, honestly, in this world where it's hard to be shocked by anybody doing something racist or classist, this one shocked me, man. Like, how did that get through the, the policy channels to be like, I know this is what we're gonna do? Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Just trash. And just quick side note, my district moved to Canvas as our learning management system this year, and I'm still learning it. Everyone's still learning it. It's a lot to it, but the speed grader aspect of it is the one part that I just want to just really shout out to technology, because that is super dope. And Jeff, I don't know if you're familiar, because I don't think LAUSD uses Canvas, but when students submit work through Canvas, I could just fly through the work really quickly and give feedback either based on a rubric that I create or whatever. But one of the features that I love is it lets you just record audio feedback or video feedback to students for their work. And man, I am flying through feedback because I'm a slow typer. I never learned how to type correctly. And I know typer is not the word, but you know what I mean. And yes, I wrote a whole dissertation without knowing how to type correctly. Don't judge me. But that speed grader and being able to give just verbal feedback right away, boom, that is super dope. It's not an algorithm. It's not predicting how my students will do. It's me utilizing technology to give them feedback as quickly as I can. And that part is super dope. So yay for Canvas. This is not a sponsored segment here. And boo for whoever the hell wrote that algorithm that they thought was going to correctly predict students' scores on these exams.
Yeah, it's like Minority Report for school, man. They got some precogs in
and
a,
remind
in a
me,
pool
Jeff,
somewhere.
did everything work out well in that movie? Did the system work out well in that movie?
Oh man,
It never works out well. It never does. The
certainly
robot
did
apocalypse
not.
is upon us, and Minority Report wasn't robot apocalypse, but still similar themes.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that although this episode is not brought to you by Canvas, if Canvas would like for this episode to be brought to you by Canvas, they can reach out to us at allaboveshow@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Jeff, I think we have time probably for one more story. And, these are all been pretty sad, I would say, stories. The SAT and ACT and the inequities baked within trying to issue those or have students do a test optional thing, the teacher morale and teachers possibly resigning because of the craziness of this year, and of course the robot apocalypse using our grade books or tests and assessments in a very disastrous, racist way. All really downbeat type of stories, man. Could we have one uplifting, humanizing, the world is going to be okay type of story? Please, Jeff?
You talking to me, Manuel? Is that where you're directing this question? Because the answer...
that's what I was going
The answer
for.
is no. But this one is also so crazy that you can laugh at it. So, I mean, maybe there's an upside.
Laughter helps.
Maybe there's an
Laughter
upside
helps
to
with
that.
the pain.
Yeah, man. I mean, these are special times we're living in. That's all I can say, Manuel. But our next and final lexicon term for the day for you, Manuel, it's a lovely term. I know everyone will find it just like delicate and beautiful. Snowflake.
Okay, this sounds like a feel good. Now, we don't get snowflakes in California. We do get ash
we do get
raining
snowflakes
down on our cars from all
in
the
the
fires.
mountains.
But the ash drops similar to snowflakes dropping.
Yes, in the mountains we get snowflakes. In the ski resorts and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, those parts of California we do. California has it all. Beaches, snow, all that. But don't come here. We're already crowded. Housing is already expensive.
Plus it's
but
all on
California's
fire
beautiful.
and we don't have any water. So, there's that.
All that.
Yes, but this particular use of the term snowflake is referring to the masses of wonderful people out there who have been with so much self-righteousness, the advocates of free speech across the country and the accusers of everyone on the left in their political correctness, who now are saying that we need to censor the acclaimed 1619 project from being taught in America's schools. And chief among the snowflakes, we're going to call out the one, the only, number 45, Donald J. Trump, and his stooge-in-chief of the U.S. Department of Education, none other than the number one AOTA show hater, Miss Betsy DeVos. Now,
yeah, she is not AOTA fam. She is not AOTA
yeah, we
fam.
see those thumbs down on YouTube, Betsy. We see, we're watching you. Okay, so this story, Manuel, it really, we kind of put together from an amalgamation of good reporting from folks from a few outlets. So we want to give a shout out to Christian Spencer from The Grio and Josephine Harvey from Huffington Post. And as some folks may have heard, in the opening days of September, Donald Trump tweeted the Department of Education was investigating whether California public schools had implemented the New York Times 1619 project into their curriculum. He said, and I quote, "The Department of Education is looking at this. If so, they will not be funded." Now, that was on a September 1st tweet that he was sharing from an unverified account stating that California schools were using the curriculum. The 1619 project is, of course, an ongoing initiative from the New York Times Magazine created by Pulitzer Prize winner Nicole Hannah-Jones that began in August of 2019, the 400th anniversary of the beginning of slavery in America. The project aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative, according to the New York Times website. Now, Trump's tweet follows a White House memo, which was also recently released at the end of August, that ordered federal agencies to discontinue racial sensitivity training. The Trump administration claimed that trainings that mention white privilege or suggest that racism is part of the nation's foundation undercut the government's core values. All agencies were directed to cancel any training related to white privilege or critical race theory. This two-page memo was put out by Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Voigt, and who said that the president has directed me to ensure that the federal agencies cease and desist from using taxpayer dollars to fund these divisive, un-American propaganda training sessions. Now, Manuel, I'm just going to take a deep breath here and have like a woosah moment while I let you respond to these disgusting, bigoted, racist, jerk-faced people that we need to talk about here for a minute. So do your thing. I'm just going to take some deep breaths.
You do that, Jeff. Jerk face. Wow, those
I'm trying to keep it PG-13 here for the AOTA family audience. I got some other words, okay? I got some other words. We could talk about it offline.
Yeah, well, I just want to point out that you promised that our fourth story would be a heartfelt, warm, humanizing story. I'm pretty sure you promised that. Our listeners or viewers could rewind and see where you promised that. Mm-hmm. But, I'm dismayed that we almost made it through an episode without having to reference this dumpster fire in the White House. We almost made it through, but, it's just, how can you not talk about this? Now, obviously, as a history teacher, there's so many times in history where there's some government, some leadership somewhere that accuses some segment of society or some ideas in society of being unpatriotic. And I don't know, Jeff, but I'm pretty sure certain places in history have burned books and certain curriculums because they were quote unquote unpatriotic. And I think, spoiler alert, all those places ended up being terribly fascist, autocratic, undemocratic. Yep. So it's this reminds me of that, obviously. I mean, would you be surprised if a collection of Trump supporters somewhere got a whole bunch of copies of the 1619 project and literally burned it to make a point? I wouldn't be surprised by that at this point. And the whole history repeating itself thing it's almost become cliche. And as a history teacher, I got to be honest, it's similar to the discussion we had on a passing period a little while ago. Now, I'm not even going to address whether or not the 1619 project belongs in schools. If you're listening to this, you already know that it's dope work that belongs in schools. There's no question about that. But going back to something that we discussed in the passing period not too long ago, I'm worried. Like, I'm honestly worried because being a teacher, it's already stressful enough, right? It's stressful enough, period, but especially right now with distance learning or hybrid learning, pandemic teaching, whatever you're doing, it's already difficult. And to know that more than ever before, you have folks on the other side of those screens hearing what you are teaching, seeing what you're teaching, watching over their kids' shoulders. I'm honestly concerned about how many folks are hearing the president, seeing his tweets, believing the garbage that's coming out of his mouth, and lurking in their, in the kitchens and living rooms where their students are working, waiting to see if that teacher says anything that's un-American, or if that teacher uses any curriculum that they feel is racist or making America look bad. I can't imagine how many emails and calls and public comments have been made across the nation, various districts and various schools, of parents trying to complain about the content that their kid is getting from their teacher, and those complaints stemming from these discussions, this nonsense that's been coming from the White House. Folks have been almost deputized to be on alert for quote unquote un-American stuff from these so-called liberal, crazy, wacko teachers. And it's just amazing that we're here. And it shouldn't be amazing. I think you said a couple stories ago, this episode, like, shouldn't be shocked by anything at this point, but this is still, it's still shocking. It's just sad. It's terribly sad. All I could say for all the teachers out there and all the educators out there, just have a mental picture in mind for when a parent or somebody complains about something that they overheard from your class. I know for myself, now there are folks that very bravely and courageously don't hold back when teaching the honest history of America, and who are totally perfectly fine with whatever fire may come from administrators, from parents, from whatever. I, however, don't have the mental capacity right now, the emotional capacity, I should say, to fight those fights. Like, I don't want it. I'm not avoiding anything in my teaching. Of course, my teaching is just as, liberating as it's always been, as I've always tried to make it. But I just really don't want to bother with the angry emails or a snippet of my class ending up on some right-wing podcast and folks trying to come at me. I get enough of that for being affiliated with the work on the ethnic studies model curriculum, which is work that I'm very proud of. And I definitely expect at some point for the president to tweet about that once that curriculum is made official and approved by the State Board of Education.
You're already on the list, man. You're already a
man.
A pinko commie, collaborator. Already. That's what you.
Man, if you could see some of the emails I've gotten as just for this ethnic studies work,
Rustin, you are already on the FBI list, man. So I say, since you're there, enjoy the ride, man.
I guess so, man.
Yes.
I guess. Exactly. I mean, it's just, damn it, man. You just, the backlash to having a black president. This is all part of that backlash. And the president wasn't even a radical progressive president, just a middle of the road, moderate president. And the fact that he was half black, we have this backlash that has been going on for years, and it seems to only be getting worse. And it's just so heartbreaking. It begs the question, will I ever have a moment in my life, in my future, where I could look at America and feel that America has truly reconciled with its past and truly acknowledged the horrors of its past? And that ain't gonna happen in my lifetime. And that's sad. Honestly, it's sad. It breaks my heart. It's just sad.
Yeah, I hear you, man. It is. There's no way to look at this story and not just be like, wow, this is a scary place that we've arrived at. And it is sad to be confronted with the harsh reality that this is where we are. And at the same time, I hope, and your point, I totally appreciate, man. And I, the kind of vulnerability of teachers who are broadcasting themselves into the homes of hundreds of kids every day, right? Or dozens of kids at least every day, is is something to consider that I think, is just a new dynamic in what the profession is, right? And so the ability for your words to be recorded, taken out of context, used and sort of weaponized against you is just totally different than it was before. And that's a reality. I also think this is a moment, man, like we are on a scary precipice here from whatever, weak version of democracy we currently have, leaning towards something that is just, in my view, objectively fascist, and the threat that poses, and the role that education, in my view, has to play in challenging that kind of authoritarianism and in preserving the freedom of a democratic society that is a place that can challenge itself, right? That is a citizenry who is educated with truth and not just pure propaganda and lies, that can say, you know what, we haven't lived up to what we say our ideals are. That can say, you know what, we have had serious problems with oppression, and it looks like this, and it manifests today in these kinds of ways, and we want to make the world a better place, right? Like that's fundamentally the business that we're in school, is like developing young people so that they can go out and make the world a better place, right? Like that's what we do. That's our work. And, for us to back away from that now in this moment, I think it's critical that we do not. And I know I'm saying that from sort of the luxurious position of not being a teacher right now, not having to have it be my face that gets plastered on some crazy right-wing blog or whatever, right? So I hear that. And I'm not mad at teachers who make the decision they think is in their best interest right now. But I will say, I hope that what this represents is not only a call to arms for our profession, teachers, administrators, district officials, school board members, anyone who cares about freedom and democracy and, equality in our society, to push back against this kind of just fascist censorship, to say, you know what, the 1619 Project is Pulitzer Prize winning journalism. That is the highest prize that we give to that type of writing, essentially, right? So for them to turn around and say that this excellent piece of journalism that is coming out of one of the most noteworthy, publications in our nation, right? That is one of the most scrutinized and vetted and funded and researched and, et cetera, right? Kinds of publications in our country. To say that it's un-American because it is naming truths about our past is just fundamentally at odds with what I think that, the nature of education should be about. And I think this is a moment, this is a call to arms for us. And I hope that educators will rally behind this cause.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I definitely hope you're right. It's unfortunate that this happens to be happening at a time when so much else is happening in the life of teachers and the world of education with pandemic and all that. And of course, it's no coincidence that this is also happening as an election approaches. And these are all what used to be dog whistles, but are now just straight up bull horns from the president for sure. But hopefully, teachers and educators and district leaders and school board members and everybody does rally together and say, no, this is not what we're gonna allow to happen. All those folks who are like, oh, politics doesn't belong in the classroom. Now's your time to step up and prove that by telling the president you're the person that you voted for. We know about a third of teachers voted for this president, to say hey, stay out of our classrooms because that's not welcome here. That fascism, that authoritarianism, that propaganda. All right, folks, that about does it for today's Do Now segment. We had a lot going on in that segment, a lot of stories out there, and we just want to remind y'all to take care of y'all mentals. All right, we will be okay because our students remind us every day that the youth have this covered. We'll be all right. All right, folks, up next is our Class Dismissed, where we take a look at folks doing wonderful things in the world of education. Stay tuned.
Hey, folks, thanks for being a big supporter of All the Above. We really appreciate it, and we need your help. All you need to do is go to AOTAshow.com/support. That's AOTAshow.com/support. There, you can chip in via Venmo, via Cash App, or most importantly, you can go to our Anchor page and subscribe there. Everything you can do to help us helps us put together incredible content here on All the Above and make sure you're getting the best each and every week. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, folks, it's time for Class Dismissed, where we like to give shout outs for folks doing wonderful things in the world of education. Jeff, who we got today?
Well, Manuel, today we want to give a heartfelt happy trails to, a person who is a noteworthy figure in our profession and in the kind of national and international conversation about school and education and what schools should be, who passed away recently, that being the great Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson. And for those who perhaps aren't familiar, Ken Robinson was a New York Times bestselling author. He led national and international projects on creative and cultural education across the world. He was a major proponent of unlocking and igniting the creative energy of people and of organizations. And Ken Robinson is still the most watched speaker in TED's history. His 2006 TED Talk, Do Schools Kill Creativity, has been viewed nearly 70 million times and has been seen by an estimated 380 million people across 160 countries across the world. So I know for many progressive educators out there, many folks who are like-minded and thinking that creativity is something we have kind of beaten out of the process and machinations of school, and that we need to prioritize in a different way than I think a lot of our structures currently allow us to. He was a major inspiration and someone who I think will certainly be missed. So we want to just say, Sir Ken Robinson, we hear you, we see you, and rest in peace.
Happy trails indeed. Rest in peace, Sir Ken Robinson. All right, folks. That about does it for this episode of All of the Above. You'll definitely want to go ahead and hit that follow and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be at you in 1 week with a passing period for the podcast listeners at least. And in 2 weeks with a brand new full episode in which we'll be taking a look at science classes and anti-racism. You don't want to miss that. All right, so stay tuned, folks. We'll check you next time.